Everybody ready? Okay, it's 6:02. Call the meeting to order. All right. Follow along. Just follow it in order. The first thing I have is, besides call to order, is introduction of the new city secretary, Nancy Mohar. Did I say it correctly?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, I believe everybody's met her, but wanted to at least do a formal introduction. Next item I had was we brought up the fact of reviewing the bylaws from where they are currently with the changes. There should be a copy of the bylaws in here. Do you want to say anything on that?
For EDCA bylaws, there were no changes required, I guess, based off of current EDC statutes from Texas. So if there's any changes wanted, it would be by desire of the board, and then if you wanted to update, we could then make a proposal and update from there, as long as the update doesn't conflict with current state statutes. But there's nothing in conflict with current statutes. Specifically, I was asked to look at eligibility of members, and it's in line with the requirement for the state.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions for Philip on that portion? Okay. Are there any other questions on the bylaws? Okay. Moving on to the next item. In the packet is the EDC budget information. So if there's any questions on that.
The budget here, just out of curiosity, says we've only spent like, I don't know, a couple thousand, around $3,200. But yet we more recently approved to spend way more than we have budgeted. Are we gonna work that into this year's budget, or what are we doing there? Because we have $46,875, of which $43,585.54 is only remaining. Yet we approved $76,000 on the ARPA project. Oh gosh, way back in April, I believe.
I don't believe those numbers are right for this board. Do you have the exact numbers that we?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but
70.
the money will be spent. It hasn't been spent yet. And EDCA approved to spend money from B to do a different type project. So the money will actually, pardon me, either board, but it will come from reserves by the vote that you all made already, that belongs to the EDC board, but it hasn't been paid yet, so it won't show yet. And it will be farther down the road as the construction progresses is when that payment will be made.
So are we gonna be working that into future budgets as well?
That's one that, with it being down the road, we probably want to, as we go into budget season, break that down and review that very granularly when we go through it.
Right. And you'll want to earmark the money that has already been approved from that specific Cedars account or that line item for the EDC, so that it can't be spent on anything else. And then when you work on your new budget for the new budget year, you'll work on expenses for things that'll be coming up in the new year, but you will have already reserved the money for this item from this fiscal year.
Does that answer your question, Courtney?
Not really, but that's okay. We'll have to deal with it in the future budgets anyway, because we did approve to spend $76,821 to be exact, of that out of this budget, and EDC approved to make decisions for EDCB, but if we appoint an EDCB, then that would be up to their budget. So we would have to either earmark what money is left for what we've approved to continue in that project, because we approved it in this year, and then move forward with the remainder, or have EDCB move forward with that remainder. I just wanted to, like, if we're going to discuss upcoming projects, that needs to be on our list of discussion, I would think.
So since it has already been approved by this board, it'll remain as approved by this EDC board.
Right.
And the money that is coming from the EDCB reserves will be earmarked, and so it won't be spent, or it won't have to be managed, other than to continue to be aware that that is an expense that the board's committed to. So it shouldn't affect your next year's budget for new projects, because you'll build your budget based on remaining reserves and anticipated income for the next fiscal year. So if you wanted to do other projects, you've got reserve money that will be remaining, and then you'll, based on your projected income for fiscal 2025.
But as a reminder, it's coming out of EDC B
That's
and
right.
not A.
Yeah,
And the
may I-
numbers we're looking at right here are EDC A. Right.
So if I may add, so no, the money is coming out of EDCA. EDCA
Right.
cannot spend EDCB funds.
But we're
Yes.
spending
Right.
it on
But
B
it's,
projects.
right,
a
so
B-type
it's a
project. You're right.
B-type project
Got it.
that A can do from A funds.
Got
So
it.
just
It
to
needs
clarify,
be
so,
budgeted.
right, and so it's an FY24 obligation, which my guess will be an FY25 expense. And so as part of the FY25 planning, that amount needs to be allocated because it's obligated. So going into FY25, you go, okay, we know we're gonna spend 78, et cetera, on that project that's been approved. What else do we have in the budget? You know, what are our reserves? What's our current? Because I think there's two funds, if I recall. There's sort of an operating fund where some funds sent, and then that gets stripped off, and then there's a reserve fund. And then, you know, that reserve fund is obligatable. I presume it's still in cash and not in investments, so I presume it's quick to get a hold of. And so as you build out FY25, your projects list, which I think is the next item to discuss, like, hey, we want to do roads. We want to do what, you know, we kind of make the laundry list now and then start looking at what those costs are. And then you have your proposed, hey, we know we have the ARPA project done. We also want to do roads. That's, I'm making up a number, 100,000 done, and we have this done. So we need this many funds in operational budget going into FY25, and then the rest can remain in reserves and accumulate the 2.5% interest or whatever it is, right? And that's kind of how to look at it. Because my understanding is both those fund accounts are accessible by A to use for what it needs to be used for, yes. But yes,
Until we set forth with the council going forward of putting an EDCB in place, correct?
Right, EDCB remains what it is. Yeah, now I understand it has its own funds, its own reserve as well. No projects are allocated to EDCB because there's not a board that is sat. Once B gets sat and comes up with their laundry list, they'll set out the same thing. Hey, in FY25 we want to do an airport, whatever it might be, and then right, and then you'll go through the same process of allocating it, getting it approved by the council, and then working towards spending those funds, whether through direct economic incentives or contracts, et cetera, like that.
But and that will go through B.
Yes, thank you for the correction on that.
Yeah,
But
we just
so-
have to make sure that we allocate those monies through EDCA when we present our
Right.
budgeting.
When we're doing it, we need to put them for expenses for 25.
We've already
were approved
allocated, we've obligated
this year.
76.
Right.
We've only got 43 available.
We got 43 current available. We still have reserves that this will come from.
You have 43 in your annual budget, but you also have the reserve money. Yeah.
Correct, but we don't have a listing of what is allocated to EDCA in particular for 2023, 2024. So without knowing what that reserve number looks like, you're just kind of using it as a fund. It's just in a general fund. You would have to show the revenue on what that looks like, and then just make sure that we include any overages in our next
Shouldn't
year's
be any.
budget. So like when we come back for, I think it's August the 3rd or whenever the next budget workshop is, as EDCA, we would need to be able to come in and say, okay, well, we had an
We have these
overage or
projects,
obligation
you know,
of
or-
$30,000 or whatever that number is.
Above
And
last
then
year's
I
budget.
don't also know in this particular budget, I mean, yeah, we've got 43 now, but I think we pay Nixle or something out of this as well. So I don't know what else would be left. If you could find that out for this year, that'd be great, going into the budget for next year, or budget planning for next year.
I don't have that in front of me, but I will find out what that is. But it's nowhere near this.
If I might, we'll be sure and prepare all of the balances the budget versus actual, the outstanding expenses that are expected through the rest of the fiscal year, and have that all available for you when you do your budget workshop.
Okay.
Or when A does the budget workshop, I should say.
Are there any other questions on that? Okay. Next item is discuss for any proposed projects. This time we don't have any other than the approved. So,
But again, if I may, if there are any that wants to be proposed or at least wants to be discussed and worked towards, then we could start building towards that as part of EDCA. Like, we want to do fill in the blank,
As part
we
of
could set that out and then start working towards that. So it becomes a proposed project that would then get approved by the board and then approved by the council, et cetera, and then budgeted for FY25.
okay.
So.
Are there any projects anybody wants to discuss for this board? Okay. With that, we can move on to the next item.
I had a question on budgeting. Do we have a separate EDCA meeting? And like we would before our regular budget meeting? If we're gonna establish our own budget,
Right.
and then we're working on one for the city that would not be
For
EDCA.
EDCA would need to do their own budget.
Okay, so we would have a separate
It
meeting.
would be its own.
Okay, and we could do that. We could do those together. I mean, like we do here, one following the other. That's what I mean.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't?
There's not any reason you cannot do it, it's just probably
A long day.
time frame consideration, how many hours in a day.
A lot of numbers to be looking at too, and trying to keep them straight. I would actually have it on my opinion, I would have it on a separate day.
That would be my take. Is there any?
Should we decide on a date while we're here?
I know you didn't ask me, but we also have an agenda item coming up during city council today about EDC boards, so you might consider letting the decision on a date for your budget workshop be after you know if there are some changes made to the boards today, so that everybody who's on it can have some input about when they're available. Up to y'all.
Just out of curiosity, Justin, on the bylaws that we just went over, those haven't changed apparently since 2009. But that states we're gonna leave it as council on at least EDCA. And we, as an EDC board, just so we keep it all straight, because it is very confusing, have not elected a secretary or that type of thing for this board.
Correct.
Are you anticipating doing that? I mean, if we elect a new board, that's gonna add a lot of mud to already very muddy waters directly in the middle of budgeting for money that's already allocated by this board. And just some clarification from you on that. What are your intentions? Otherwise,
This board doesn't sit itself, so that would be at the
we've already set this board though,
council did. Correct.
as per the bylaws. So we would
Well,
be,
with the change.
Bylaws don't state that it has to be council.
So yes, council sets the board, but that doesn't mean the board has to be council.
right,
Correct,
but
yeah.
if we go into our next meeting, say in August or whatnot, and or after tonight's meeting, and we elect a new board, that EDC board is then going to be responsible for presenting to council a budget on monies that have already been spent
Or allocated.
or allocated, without knowledge of, we don't even have knowledge of future projects. Do we expect them to come to us with future projects and allocate that money accurately? That's the only thing I'm asking.
I mean, at this point, there are no future projects that we're aware of, other than the one for the building. Other than that, there's not any.
So EDCA will not take part in any type of zoning projects that are up and coming? we're not gonna
They
wanna
do,
do
do
any
they?
of that.
I don't think that.
Because EDCA can do certain projects, EDCB can do certain projects. EDCB has got a lot more leniency, and that budget can be their budget, but EDCA is responsible for more along those lines of things like zoning, infrastructure, public safety, things along those lines, as opposed to EDCB. They have a lot more wiggle room, if you will. So I'm just curious as to, I mean, if this isn't gonna be up to us, then whoever it is up to is gonna need to be very fast and furiously educated on whatever budget we as council expect them to
present.
offer us, yeah. In any upcoming projects that may be,
Right.
like roads or,
Right, whatever's decided on that time by the, whichever board is set for A.
okay, so we're changing the board for A.
That's done by council. I'm not aware of
Okay.
any changes
I'm
or
just
anything.
curious. Okay.
With that, I believe the next item was to discuss any project reports, which at this time there are no project reports that I'm aware of. Unless I'm missing something. Okay, next meeting date, the next item I have is to set the next meeting date. I do know we need to set an annual meeting. What is the difference between a standard meeting and the annual meeting?
There is no difference. It's just a type of requirement, meaning you have to have one annual meeting in which you discuss budget and layout, et cetera, et cetera. But again, talk about a budget workshop, things like that. And this board can set an additional meeting now for a budget workshop separate and distinct, and then whether or not that time is used or it's rolled into a different workshop, et cetera. But by setting it now, saying, yeah, we want to meet on 3 August at 5 p.m. before the whatever meeting. You can set that as a board, and then if you don't need to use that time, you just don't use that time. We just make sure to post for quorum, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the sort of thing that can still be set out for meeting times. Again, you can set a time and not use it. It's much easier. Well, you can't not set a time and use it, right? So
it needs to be to set a time.
So if there is discussion, and then if there is a new board sat between now and then that board can use that time to sit down and discuss all things budget and discuss potential projects and discuss that before going into the council.
Okay, and does that meeting need to happen in July? That's part I have a question.
If possible, since the city provides the finance work, the updates about what's been spent, all of the bookkeeping, if it could be after August 3rd or after, would be better.
Okay.
Make sure we bring you everything we possibly can.
Okay. Is there any suggestions after August 3rd, preferably?
August 3rd is a Saturday.
Well, after that day, not that day.
And I didn't mean to imply you can't have that day. If you would like to schedule it that day, go ahead.
That's not. But it's.
I can't get to the last page.
Council's the 6th.
So Tuesday the 6th is a budget workshop I'm scheduling already.
So we want it after. I don't think we want it on the 6th, do we? We can. Is there any? Other dates? So that, we have a budget workshop on the 6th, correct? You're looking at the calendar, aren't you?
I am looking at the calendar.
And that's for-
Proposed calendar.
Do we want to have that the same day? I'd say probably not.
I would say, well, I don't think we have much of a choice. Specifically, if a new board is sat, they are going to need to be, again, fast and furiously educated on what their expectations are and everything else. Even if not, I would love that education as well. As far as I mean, and if you're going into a budget workshop as council, kind of makes sense to know where your EDCs sit at that point too. Or at least have an idea.
If you like a date in July, you could always set a time and go through the comprehensive plan and the items from the plan that you might want to attach to projects for next year, kind of feeling those sorts of things out. Just an idea.
The last week in July.
Like maybe the 30th?
That's what I had written down was the 30th. Is there anything, anybody opposed to the 30th? That way it gives us extra time should we need another one in the 6th.
It's fine with me.
I have to work. Is that a Tuesday?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
It would be at 6 o'clock.
Consensus on the 30th?
30th.
Yes.
What time?
6 o'clock. Does that work? Okay. So we'll meet on 6 o'clock. Are there any other items to bring up to discuss? If not, we can adjourn at 6:24.